Hello everyone, and thank you very much for joining us for another story here at Annie Narrates. The title for this one goes like this. Mother-in-law moves into our house for treatment and immediately begins bossing around thinking that her son would take her side, but her own son is suspicious of her over this, and boy, the truth got out. She's lost everything overnight. Now, I know that relationships between mother-in-law and daughter-in-law have always been complicated, but I think my mother-in-law wins the competition of being one of the most twisted women out there. She's hated me and belittled me ever since I've known her. But what she did last week was ridiculous. Hear me out. I, 30 female, met my now husband Jason, 33 male, around 7 years ago. We met at the vet. Yes, I know, it's a weird place to meet. The both of us had recently adopted golden retriever puppies and were at the vet to get them dewormed and keep them up to bed with their vaccinations. Believe it or not, we bonded in the waiting room, and it was an instant connection. We both love dogs, we love sushi, and we had the same taste in movies. I was new in town. I had just moved out of my parents' place and was trying to find my way in the city. I had secured a job at a nearby salon, and it got super lonely on most days. Which is why I decided to adopt a dog, Lily. Jason had lived here his whole life and worked in marketing at an office right down the street from my salon. It was as if fate was drawing us together. He offered to show me around town, and I agreed. He took me to some nice places around the city. We had picnics by the river, long walks in the park with our dogs, and yeah, we partied like crazy in the clubs. He was always very respectful, never tried to do anything that would make me feel uncomfortable, and always made sure to drop me back home. Since he worked nearby, we would meet almost every day for lunch, chat about our day, and gossip about our coworkers. I began looking forward to meeting him every day. A few months down the line, while we were on one of our walks with the dogs, he asked me to be his girlfriend. I said yes. He was amazing. We've been together ever since. Jason was an only child to divorced parents. They divorced when he was in high school and had been living separately. Jason lived with his mother, Susan. He told me that the cause of his parents' divorce was mainly because of his mother. She was a highly controlling woman who constantly suspected everyone and everything. His father had tried to do everything he could to maintain a good relationship with her. Still, her constant nagging and emotional abuse had pushed him over the edge, and he filed for divorce after almost 20 years of marriage. I was hesitant to meet his parents. I mean, that was normal. But what really scared me was his mother's reputation. I had read so many stories of mother-in-laws from hell and how they ruin everything. I loved Jason and wanted to make our relationship work, so I agreed to meet with his parents at his mother's house after dating for nearly a year. Our first meeting was disastrous. I knew that his mother didn't like me from the minute she saw me. I wanted to make a good impression, so I baked a pecan pie to take along with me. As soon as my mother-in-law saw the pie, she squealed and asked me if I was trying to kill her. I was surprised and didn't know what to say. She then proceeded to say that she was deathly allergic to pecans and that even a whiff of them could send her into anaphylactic shock. I was mortified. Jason never told me about this, but even he looked surprised. She then proceeded to cover her nose and dump my pie in the trash. When she called us over for dinner, I was shocked to see that everything she had cooked was meat-based. I was a vegetarian. Even the mashed potato and green beans had been made with a bacon fat. I was sure Jason had informed her that I was a vegetarian many times, even in the morning. I didn't want to create a scene, but Jason was pretty surprised himself and reminded his mother that I was a vegetarian. She began apologizing, saying that it must have slipped her mind. I told her that it was no big deal at all, and an honest mistake. I tried my best to calm her down, but now she was crying and Jason had to pacify her. I told her that I had a massive sweet tooth and preferred dessert anyway. I grabbed a cookie and ate it, hoping to make her feel better. She watched me eat the whole thing before she said that it had egg in it. My face dropped and she saw that and began howling, ran to her room and locked the door. She didn't come out no matter what we did. Finally, she called Jason in to console her, and I could hear her wailing about how she was never appreciated, how everything she did was wrong, and that I had ruined everything. Yeah, great first impression. I spoke to Jason after on the way back to my apartment, and he told me it wasn't my fault. It was typical for his mother to behave this way. He had no idea that his mom was allergic to pecans, and he had told her multiple times that I was a vegetarian. He told me that his mother was probably feeling insecure because of me. He had always been very possessive and fiercely protective of him, and got extra clingy every time he had a girlfriend. She would make it a point to steal the attention somehow. This was not new behavior at all. The more I heard, the warier I got. My mother-in-law was the type of mom who felt that nobody was worthy of her son and that only she could give him the love that he deserved. Jason was very self-aware about how toxic this type of relationship was. He told me that his mother didn't know where to draw her limits, but now, because he was in a serious relationship with me, he was going to talk to her and set up some boundaries. Even though he did speak to her about it, my mother-in-law didn't back off. She made it a point to put me down whenever she could. She would disapprove of my job, my appearance, and the way that I was treating her son. She told me to my face multiple times that I didn't deserve a man like him and that I was a gold digger. She never appreciated anything I gave her. I'd find it in the trash the next day. She spoke a lot of crap about me behind my back to all her friends, and whenever my parents came to town to visit me, she would always behave extremely rudely to them and make up excuses to not meet them. Honestly, it was extremely embarrassing and disrespectful. Jason kept making excuses for his mother and tried to give her second chances, but even his patience was running thin after seeing how poorly she treated me. Susan threw a huge tantrum when Jason and I moved in together, and threw an even bigger one when we got engaged. After Jason moved in with me, I didn't meet my mother-in-law frequently, so that was a blessing. I told Jason just how much his mother disliked me. Being with her made me feel terrible about myself. Jason and his mother kept fighting because of me. He tried to reason with her so many times, but she always acted like she was the victim, as if she was the one getting insulted. She accused me of taking her boy away and that she would never forget me for it. After this incident, Jason and I decided that the less we saw of her, the better for all of our sanity. Jason and I tied the knot 3 years ago. My mother-in-law was completely against it, but attended the wedding regardless and made it a point to annoy the guests by talking about how I was undeserving of her son. Over the years, I sort of became immune to her taunts and digs about me. I had married a wonderful man who loved me and treated me like a queen, and that is all that mattered. I got pregnant almost a year after the wedding. Jason and I were overjoyed, and it was the best news we could get. Unfortunately, Jason's father passed away towards the end of my pregnancy, and that put a major damper on all of our joy. My father-in-law had always liked me, and my heart broke when I heard the news. At the funeral, we met my mother-in-law after nearly a year. Since we were meeting under such somber circumstances, or maybe because the baby was due soon, we decided to put aside our differences and reconnect. Big mistake. My mother-in-law was very happy about my pregnancy. She said that she knew that she sometimes came across as rude, but she wanted to be a part of my baby's life and she would try to change. I was skeptical, but I thought I would give her a chance. I gave birth to a beautiful baby boy a month later, and we named him George after my father-in-law. He was everything we ever wanted. When Susan came to visit me in the hospital after my delivery, she took one look at the baby and looked disgusted. She didn't even hold him. Then she quite loudly whispered to the nurse about how this baby could never be her son's baby because he didn't look anything like him. I was furious. There I was, barely an hour after a long and painful labor, only to have my mother-in-law told me that the baby was not my husband's. I couldn't deal with it. I told her to leave immediately. Jason was equally angry. As he escorted his mother out of the room, I could hear her tell him that the baby was too dark to be his and that I must have cheated. I couldn't believe it. After coming back home, Jason and I both decided that it would be best if we didn't interact with his mother anymore. Her behavior was unacceptable, and we didn't want this kind of toxicity around our son. Over the next year, we focused on caring for our son and barely interacted with her. It was a bliss. A month ago, we got a call from her completely out of the blue. She said that she had been recently diagnosed with chronic kidney disease, which was a complication of diabetes. She said that she would need to visit a hospital twice every week to get dialysis, and the hospital was very far from her place and she wouldn't be able to commute easily. She requested us to let her stay at our place for a month so that she could get used to the treatment and we could take her to the hospital. She said that she would make arrangements for a portable dialysis machine at home after that. This came as a shock to us. As much as I disliked her, she was sick and needed help. This was only for a month. We decided to let her stay over. Things started well enough. We brought her over to our place and set her up in the spare bedroom. She said that she had to be taken to the hospital on Mondays and Fridays and had to stay there for 4 hours. Since I was back at work now, I decided to drop her off while Jason picked her up and took her home. A few days into our stay, she started commenting about how messy the house was and how she couldn't sleep because George kept waking her up, back to her usual naggy self. I kept quiet because she was ill. She complained about how the dogs were not trained and how they kept trying to push her down even though they didn't. She commented about how unfit I was to take care of the family because I wasn't cooking everything and her son had to manage by himself. How I forced him to take care of the baby instead of doing it myself. And the cherry on top, how I was a terrible mother for leaving my child at daycare instead of taking care of him, only to work at my stupid salon and earn peanuts. Things were getting unbearable now. Jason was so frustrated that he barely even spoke to her anymore. She was also extremely rude to George. She never picked him up, didn't soothe him when he cried, and never gave him any attention, even when he went to her. She would go around the house commenting on all the furniture, moving things around here and there, going through my closet. I even caught her multiple times going through my phone, but every time she had an excuse by saying she was checking the time or watching a video. I even caught her giving my dog Lily chocolate, which is extremely toxic to dogs. I stopped her just in the nick of time, and she swore that she didn't know about it. I was fuming. One day, I came back home only to find out that she had called people over to paint the interior of our house. She said that the bright colors were giving her a headache and that she did me a favor. This was my last straw. When Jason came home, I told him that I couldn't deal with it anymore. His mother was ruining everything. She made up excuses, saying that she never intended to ruin anything and that she was only trying to help. The same old crocodile tears. She had expected Jason to take her side and support her, but even he didn't buy it. Jason was a patient man, more patient than I could ever be. But that evening he lost it. He told his mother that what she was doing was wrong. We had graciously allowed her to stay in the house, but she was taking advantage of us. She was bossing everyone around, ignoring the baby, insulting everyone, and even trying to poison our dog. Now she was renovating our house without our consent. This was simply not done. He told her that she had been rude and insulting to me for our entire relationship, and after this month, he didn't want to have anything to do with her. She looked stung. She threw a huge tantrum, saying that I had brainwashed Jason into hating her. I didn't care. I was proud of Jason for standing up to her. It was not easy, especially after years of emotional manipulation. That night, Jason and I had a long conversation. Why was his mother doing any of this? When she asked for help, we blindly agreed to help her because she was sick, but she never actually seemed like she was sick. In fact, she was busy trying to rearrange my house instead of resting. Jason told me that once while he was driving to work, he swore he saw my mother-in-law in a shop. But there was no way she could have been in there because she would have been in the hospital. She was always so secretive about the whole thing. She showed us a bunch of reports and prescriptions, but we had never actually met her doctor. She kept taking medications, but we didn't know what exactly she was taking. Whenever we suggested coming with her for her dialysis appointments, she would always say that she preferred to be alone during that time and that we should just drop her off at the hospital. Something was fishy. The way she behaved with George was not natural, almost like she detested him. One time, I heard George scream. I ran over, only to see that my mother-in-law was holding him while he cried and rubbed his head. I was pretty sure she smacked him. Jason and I made a plan. We decided to visit her at the hospital the next day. I would drop her there as usual, not tell her a thing. Then after a bit, we would go in and see what she was up to. I was very unsettled by everything that was happening and wanted answers. I don't know what we were expecting to find. Maybe we were just overthinking things. After dropping her off, I waited at the side for about half an hour until Jason came. As we were about to go in, we saw my mother-in-law walked out of the hospital. We were puzzled and decided to follow her. She went into a nearby mall and kept browsing all the stores, even stopping to buy some earrings. We observed from a distance, completely baffled at what we were seeing. I took some pictures to make sure that I wasn't seeing things. She was supposed to be getting dialysis right now. Instead, she was shopping. We went back into the hospital and pretended to wait for her. She went back into the hospital, came back out 10 minutes later, walked towards the car, and got in complaining about how we were late and acting like everything was normal. This was it. I told her that we knew that she wasn't in the hospital. The game was up. She denied it at first, calling me ridiculous, but even Jason wanted answers. We showed her the pictures and threatened to call the police. That's when she finally told us everything. She said that she wasn't sick. She made the whole thing up just so that she could stay with us. I was confused. Why did she have to go to such great lengths if the only reason was because she wanted to stay with us? What she said next made things much clearer. When my father-in-law passed away, almost everything in his will got passed down to Jason, even his house and car. My mother-in-law didn't get a single penny. She said that this infuriated her because she had spent more than 20 years with him and he didn't leave her anything. She called him selfish. She couldn't bear the fact that I got to live in luxury while she was running away in her apartment. Then she said something that shocked me. She told me that she had always been suspicious that I was cheating on Jason, and her suspicions were confirmed when she saw her son. She was so sure that the baby was not Jason's, and she hated the fact that the money which she deserved would be spent on this baby. She couldn't stand it. She somehow had to prove that the baby was not Jason's and finally exposed me as a cheater. She wanted Jason to see my quote-unquote true colors so that he could finally get some sense into his head and leave me once and for all and move back in with her. At this point, I didn't know how to feel, but it kept getting worse. She made a plan to fake an illness so that she could move in and get the DNA sample from George and do a paternity test. Remember the day that I found George crying and rubbing his head? This woman had pulled his hair out. I wanted to punch her. My mother-in-law had never liked me, and I was okay with that. But to hurt my son, that's where I had to draw the line. And so did Jason. I told her that George was our son. There was no question about it. My father-in-law had been so frustrated with her his whole life that he left nothing for her. And honestly, she deserved it. If she thought that she could defame me and take our money, she was sadly mistaken. I have always been loyal to her son, and he knew that very well. She started crying and pushing me, telling Jason that when the reports came back, he would see for himself that the baby wasn't his, and that she was doing all this only because she loved him. For the first time in my life, I heard Jason raise his voice. He was so mad. He was trembling. He told her that she had emotionally manipulated him his whole life and he wasn't going to stand it anymore. His father had not given her any money, and neither was he. No matter how much she cried and begged, he didn't listen to her. He told her that she was not welcome to our house anymore, and she would never see our son again. He then dropped me back home, packed up her stuff, called her a taxi, and sent her back home. This happened 2 days ago, and we're still reeling from this incident. I cannot believe she went to these lengths to try to defame me. Jason is even angrier than I am, but I can tell that he feels bad for yelling at her. Is cutting her out of our life too harsh? I have had such an overwhelming response to this post, it's crazy. I didn't expect this to blow up, but since y'all are asking for an update, here you go. It's been about 2 weeks now, and my mother-in-law is still at it. She went on Facebook and posted a video publicly talking about how I had cheated on her son and had another man's baby. She also said that when she tried confronting me, I hit her. Apparently, when she came over to stay with us, both Jason and I abused her. She even started a petition to put my dog down because she bit her multiple times. I'm not going to lie, all this got to me. I probably cried every night, but then I realized that's exactly what she wants, to ruin my life. The only support she had was her son. Now she has nothing. So she's doing ridiculous things to get attention, and sadly, no one cares what she has to say. She has been a bitter and rude woman her whole life. Nobody believes a word she says. There is no point in trying to reason with her because she is that delusional. We decided on a new approach, to attack with kindness. She calls us every day, demanding money and going on the same old rants, trying to instigate us. We listen politely and never lose our temper. This frustrates her so much that she cuts the phone herself. You can call me rude, but this woman has put me through so much, I can't help feeling smug. Hi, sorry for such a late update, but a lot has happened over the last month. We decided to put my mother-in-law in a retirement home. After we cut contact with her, she became a menace to her neighbors. She lost her mind and tried attacking the dog, started yelling for no reason, losing her temper at small things. Last week, we got a call that she had fallen down the stairs and hurt her hip. When the neighbors went to check, they found out that her house was a mess. There was no food, and she hadn't paid rent in months. A pitiful state, I must admit. I felt pretty terrible. It was her fault that she didn't have anyone to look after her. She is a terrible woman, but at the end of the day, she is, in some way, our responsibility, no matter how bad she was to us. She needed help. We admitted her to an assisted living facility. Since her injury, she has a full-time nurse to help her out. They make sure that she has all meals and take good care of her. She even has people to socialize with. Jason visited her a couple of times and said she was okay. I think I'm going to end this thread here. There were a lot of terrible comments calling me a bad daughter-in-law and Jason a bad son. I just want to know if you would be okay with someone trying to prove that your child was not actually yours and literally lying about a sickness that they didn't have. She took us for a ride. She insulted me and belittled me my entire relationship. If you think that's okay, then that's your opinion. Maybe a reflection of your own character. For the majority of you that gave me advice, thank you. I appreciate it. I thought I was done with this thread. It's been months since I ended it, but I still get new replies asking about the paternity test. I can't believe I have to say this, but yes, Jason is George's father. There is no question about it. He looks more like me, but if you look at his eyes, his smile, and even his ears, you'll see it yourself. Also, a lot of y'all were asking how my mother-in-law got the test done. She gave a sample of my son's hair as well as a sample of her own hair. No, my husband did not give a semen sample. How do you think she would have gotten that? Ew. I don't know the science behind it. But you don't always need a sample from the father for a paternity test. The test proved that she was George's paternal grandma. Small update on my mother-in-law. She's doing good in the facility. Jason visits her every week, but I don't. I think it's better if I stay away. From what I've heard, she is healthy and her hip injury has healed. She's even made a few friends. Okay, now this thread has been going on for ages. I am officially ending. Thanks for listening. And that was it for today's story. Thank you very much for listening. Go ahead and smash the like button for me and subscribe for more stories. Thanks again. We'll be seeing you in the next one.